Hello, welcome to another episode of Field of Screams podcast. Today we will be talking about Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. After Dream Warriors was such a big hit, it was no shock that Bob Shaye wanted to get another movie going. Let's not wait, let's get these characters back, let's get this next movie going. But things aren't always that easy. For one, writer's strike was happening. So they couldn't get anyone to really pen a script down. There was even a quote that said, numerous people within the studio had a hand in trying to write the plot for this movie. The second thing was, they could not find a director to take this film either. It didn't have a script. They kind of had a blueprint of what they wanted to do, but there was no actual script. Rennie Harlan, he really wanted to do this film. He said he went to New Line Cinemas every day and just begged them. He kept saying, look, listen, you don't have a script. I'm your man. I gotta do this movie. I have all these different ideas. You gotta have me do it. And he kept begging and showing up at the studio. And eventually Bob Shaye said he wasn't even changing clothes. And he's like, you know what, I'm just gonna throw this guy a bone. Which if you read Rennie Harlan's interview and just see Bob Shaye's response, it just completely shocks me. Because I think Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors is a pretty beloved movie. And this is the fourth movie in this very popular franchise, and just how they couldn't really get the ball rolling. And Harlan even says, whenever they went to shoot scenes, the actors didn't even have their lines till the day of. They were literally showing up early, writing the script, how is this all going to go down, and then they would film it on the spot. And then during lunch, they would write more of the movie, and then they'd go to film again. Now, why am I talking about all this backstory before I talk about the actual movie? I think it's because it's very important, because I think it kind of shows why this movie turned out the way it is. I always kind of think of this movie as the Rocky IV. And don't get me wrong, I love Rocky IV. I really do. It's my favorite movie in the franchise. But if you go back and rewatch Rocky IV, there's not a whole lot of story, right? There's the Russian, there's Rocky, there's a little bit of conflict, and then the rest of the movie is just soundtracks playing Rocky working out, and a whole bunch of fighting. There's not a lot of plot going on. In this film, I could say the same thing. There's a lot of cool kills in this film, but there's not a whole lot of plot. Sometimes things don't make sense. Sometimes things just seem wild and out of left field. And I think that's because of the writer's strike. And, this director who is very passionate about doing this film, he just wanted the cool kills. He had all these crazy ideas. He wanted to tie it into one film, and he didn't have a script. And this is kind of what we get. We get a movie with not great plot. We get a movie with lots of good kills and lots of stuff that looks cool. Because again, this guy cares a lot. If you like reading behind the scenes type stuff, I highly recommend reading an interview with Rennie Harlan talking about doing this film. The dude is very passionate. He is very proud of making this film. And it's just kind of a good feel-good story. He was like an underdog, like Rocky. But I'll get off the comparison of Rocky IV and Nightmare on Elm Street 4, and let's jump into this movie. Now, when this movie starts, it gives us a bitter truth to swallow. We get Kristen, who's having a nightmare, like these movies happen. But when you see Kristen, you're like, oh, that ain't Kristen. No, it is Kristen. But it's not the same actress who played Kristen in Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Patricia Arquette played Kristen in number 3. We have Tuesday Knight playing Kristen in part 4. If you're wondering why this happened, there's various reasons that are given for why Patricia Arquette did not return. If you give it a simple Google and say, why did Patricia Arquette not return to Nightmare on Elm Street? The first thing that pops up at the very top, it says Patricia Arquette decided not to return, preferring to choose roles in more serious and prestigious films. But then I see other articles that say that she was pregnant during this time. Then I see other articles that say her agent wanted a lot of money, Bob Shaye wouldn't give the money, therefore she did not return. Now, what's the real reason she didn't return? Only Bob Shaye, Patricia Arquette, their agents, and those in that little circle know. But, the bitter truth is, that whenever you start this movie, there is just that bitter pill of, aw man, they recast her. And it kind of sucks for Tuesday Night, because I imagine she did her best. She even did a song for this movie. It just kind of sucks. And this movie, right when it starts, like, she's in this nightmare, and she starts talking to herself, and she goes, "It's okay, Kristen, get a hold of yourself. Come on, Kristen, wake up." And she's specifically saying her name over and over again as if to remind the audience, hey, it's me, Kristen. I know I'm a different actress, but I'm playing the role of Kristen. But she does pull in Kincaid and Joey from Nightmare on Elm Street 3, because she thinks Freddy's going to return, and Kincaid and Joey, they're just kind of like, Kristen, you gotta quit doing this. Like, Freddy's dead, he's not going to return, just quit. And Joey's like, yeah, the furnace is even hot, like, check it out. And they even open up the furnace, and for some reason, Kincaid's dog flies through it and bites Kristen's arm. I think it's supposed to be a jump scare. It's kind of just a weird scene. And I think the scene's just here to let us know, like, hey, Tuesday Night is now Kristen. Get over it. Once we get the scene where we have the people from Part 3 returning, and they're like, hey, these are the 3 main characters. So now we have to show you some new characters because we gotta have some people to kill, and we gotta get this new plot going. So Kristen is good friends with a girl named Alice. Alice has a very mean dad. They show us this where Allison's walking out, she sees Kristen, she goes, oh, hey, bestie, because, we gotta know they're really good friends. And while she's walking out, her dad's like, oh, you going out dressed like that? And he's like staring her down. And the girl looks like she's going to church. I mean, she's not wearing anything risky. It's like a dress. It's like kind of baggy. Her hair is, it looks like normal hair. Like there's just nothing risky about it. And the dad's just on her case. Like, that's the thing about these movies. There are never any good parents for the main characters. But yeah, this girl named Alice, she's tagging along. She's probably going to be the main character, hint, hint. Alice has a brother named Rick. Rick is sneaking out of his window just so he doesn't have to talk to their mean dad. But they also show us that Rick is dating Kristen. They show us that by him just giving her a quick kiss. And yeah, so we got 2 new characters right off the bat, Alice and Rick. They all go to school. They meet up with their friend, Debbie, whose only character traits are that she hates bugs and she loves working out. That's her only quotes, and, they only put it in because it's gonna come in later when Freddy kills her. That's her only role in this movie. She's like, oh, I just want to go work out. Or she'll see a bug and she'll be like, oh, ew, I hate bugs. That's Debbie's role in this film. We come across a character named Dan, who is the school jock. Alice has a thing for Dan, and Alice does this thing where she daydreams a lot in this movie, and one of her daydreams, like, Dan walks up to her, and he's kind of like, oh, hey there. And she's like, you are one major league hunk. And then it, like, cuts to reality, and it's like, oh, okay. The way they treat Alice's character throughout this movie, once again, writer's strike was going on. But some of the things that this Alice character does, like, it's just kind of weird. Dream Warriors was kind of a jump, in belief. Like, even when you're just watching this movie, a guy haunting people's dreams, like, you gotta bend reality a bit. But this movie, like, we got our main character daydreaming all the time. Like, it's really cheesy. And just some of the stuff that goes on. Like, you notice right away, that real writers are not present while this film was being made. Like, this is just kind of a nice visual movie. A movie to have fun with. You can't take serious really at all. We also have another character named Sheila in this film. Sheila is our nerd in the friend group. You can tell this because she has gigantic glasses that she's constantly pushing up from the bridge of her nose. And she has asthma, the stereotypical nerd. So yeah, these are just some of the characters that we have. Another thing they let us know through the school scene is Kincaid and Joey, they have been reintegrated into public. They're going to the same school as Kristen and Alice. Joey and Kincaid, they go and talk to Kristen. They're trying to tell her, like, quit using your dream powers, let Freddy just rest. Like, this stuff is over. One thing that kind of kills me is, like, Rick walks up and he's like, wow, those guys are a bunch of weirdos. And it's like, dude, you look like you have roadkill on your head. Like, look at your hair. I know that was 80s, but I mean, like, this guy just doesn't have room to talk. Also, he practices, like, kung fu or karate by himself, like, in the garage. That's his habit. And, like, if you like to do karate or kung fu, like, that's awesome. But I mean, this guy, like, it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, where he's like, oh, those guys are a bunch of weirdos. But then he goes and karate chops punching bags in his garage. And he does other weird stuff in this movie, which I'll talk about here in a minute. So this is the beginning of the film that it basically sets for us. Like, the rest of the scenes, like, it just kind of shows us again that Alice's dad is really mean. He looks at the food she makes. He's like, what am I, a rabbit? And he goes like, like, just like makes a really weird face at her. And he's just always bitter and mad about something. But eventually we get to where Kincaid, he goes to dream and he wakes up in that junkyard where we were in part 3. You might be wondering, well, how does Freddy come back? Oh, it's simple. A dog pisses fire and then Freddy comes back. Yeah, that's what they settled with. Which I know, like, sometimes it's hard to, like, find ways for Freddy to keep coming back. This is number 4. But yeah, like, I mean, even behind the scenes, like, they just kind of laugh about it. They're like, yeah, like, Freddy's totally evil. Like, what other way can you bring him back? Like, a dog pisses out fire, and here he is. Anyways, besides that reason, it does kind of look cool when he's finally back. He grabs his hat, it's... You could almost play that song from Jason, like, yeah, he's back. The man, well, he's not the man behind the mask, but maybe the man with the hat. the man that wears a hat. Okay, I'll stop. The next 2 kills are very frustrating. Kincaid gets stabbed in this dream. Okay, so I mean, Kincaid and Joey, they bite the dust extremely early. Like, they're in the film for like the first 15-20 minutes. The people that made this movie, they're like, hey, we gotta move on from part 3, so we gotta do away with these 2. And man, they kill them off so quick. I mean, like, Joey, like, he looks up at a poster with, like, a hot girl in it. He looks at his waterbed. The hot girl's in the waterbed. Then Freddy pops out, cuts it open, and he's like, talk about a wet dream, and kills Joey right after he kills Kincaid. It's, like, right after another. And it is kind of cool, like, when Joey's mom comes in, like, you just see Joey's body floating in the water mattress. So, like, right away, like, 2 of the 3 survivors from the 3rd film, they're killed off very easily. And another thing, like, during this part, like, the police activity is, like, nowhere to be seen. Like, in the first film, like, when, what's-her-name dies, like, the cops are literally following the main characters. They're trying to figure out reasons. In, like, number 3, like, Freddy sometimes does his kills and, like, tries to play it off as a suicide, so, like, the cops aren't coming after him. This movie, he's literally putting people in water beds, he's stabbing Kincaid, which Kincaid's poor dog was just, like, laying by him as he's dying, like, dude, that's awful. Like, the people who love number 3, like, you are just trashing these characters that we love, and you're doing it quickly. It sucks. But yeah, that's a major gripe I think a lot of people have with this film, and me included, because I really like these characters. To be honest, I wanted to follow Kincaid and Joey more than I wanted to follow Alice in this movie, or even Rick, or any of the new characters. Like, those characters were a lot cooler, and you kill them off super early, so bummer. Next, we kind of see the new characters kind of merging together with Kristen, to where they're trying to figure out, what happened to Kincaid and Joey, which they know. They go and visit, the old house where where it all started. And even Dan's kind of tagging along, and it's kind of cool. You gotta like Dan. I mean, Dan's like this perfect high school jock. All the girls love him. Debbie loves him. Alice loves him. And he could be out practicing football or whatever, like these movies like to do. They like to make the jock the bully. But Nightmare on Elm Street, they like to take those little stereotypes and just spin them around and say, nah, we're going to do something different. Dan's just going to be a down-to-earth jock. And that's kind of what he does. Like, he hangs around the group, he tags along with Rick, who, again, he calls other people weirdos, and his hairdo's awful. I'm piling on Rick here, but I think it's kind of deserved. I kind of like Rick a little bit as the film goes, but, man, he's just kind of an awkward character. Alice keeps telling Kristen about this like nursery rhyme about a dream master and how like you basically just got to keep in control. You know, you got to control your own dreams. And a lot of times it just comes across as kind of nonsense. But you know it's going to come in later in the film. But eventually, like Kristen, Kristen's got that awful mom from part 3. Well, guess what? In this movie, she's not any better. She starts feeding Kristen these sleeping pills. You would think her mom would find out what happened in part 3 and not force feed her sleeping pills, but that's what her mom does, and she gets caught in Freddy's dream. She's on the beach in her bathing suit. Freddy comes up like a shark and just pops out of a sandcastle. Freddy's wearing sunglasses. If you want to say the franchise kind of jumped the shark, you can either say it jumped the shark in this movie or it's starting to. Freddy's just walking around with sunglasses, like doing catchphrases. It's funny. It's fun. But he's no longer scary like he was in 1 or 2 or even 3 in some parts. Eventually, he gets Kristen into like this boiler room during the dream. Like, he makes her go through sand, and then she's in the boiler room, and he's like, "Summon another friend. I want to kill more." And then she brings in Alice. Of course, the girl who's been chanting about the Dream Warrior or Dream Master stuff, whatever. As you can tell, I didn't really care for the character Alice for most of this film. But I do think she does get better as the film goes, and I think she's a lot better in part 5. Regardless of how that film goes, I think the actress acted a lot better, and I think that might be because maybe she had a better script, and she kind of knew what she was doing before the day of. Maybe. Freddy, when he sees Alice, he goes, "How sweet, fresh meat." And then he chucks Kristen into like a boiler, which if Patricia Arquette was in this film, that would be an awful way to deal with her character too. Part of me thinks like, they killed Kincaid and Joey off right away because they knew probably Tuesday night wasn't going to fill that void that well. So they're like, well, we got to kind of kill the survivors and just get a brand new final girl. Which is kind of what they do here. And as Kristen is in the boiler, the furnace, the boiling water, and like her skin is like singed, she almost looks like a corpse. But she's like, "Hey Alice, you need my power." And then she like tosses her power out of the furnace, and it goes to Alice, and that's how Alice gets her powers. It's a pretty goofed up scene. It really is. And Alice now, whenever her friends die, their skills go to her. Yeah, you heard that right. Like the skills that they've had, they go to her. Which you would think she would get Kincaid's super strength, and Joey's supersonic yell. But maybe because Kristen didn't throw her powers before they died, I don't know. But that's kind of the plot of this movie. Kristen now has their powers, and they kind of let you know that. Because, like, she goes to the bathroom. While she's in the bathroom, she pulls out a cigarette. She pulls out a lighter. She goes to light the cigarette, and she goes, "Wait a minute. I don't smoke." It's like, are you serious? It would literally be like me buying Taylor Swift concert tickets, going all the way to the concert, going inside the venue, sitting down, and me being like, "Wait a minute. I don't even like Taylor Swift. What am I doing here?" It's just dumb. Anyways, the next kill we got going on here is Sheila. She's sitting in class. Alice falls asleep during class and I guess accidentally pulls Sheila into her dream. And Freddy comes up. You know what's going to happen. Freddy walks up to her and that gets right in her face. And he does this thing with his tongue yet again that he does in the first one. He goes up to her and just goes like, very close to her. And yet again, for those of you who don't want to say, Freddy Krueger is very inappropriate with children. Because like the reboot, they're like, oh, like Freddy Krueger molests kids. And like people are like, why would they do that? Freddy didn't do that. He killed kids. But like all these like clues and hints in these old movies, it's like Freddy's pretty inappropriate with high school kids here. Come on. And then he even says, "You want to suck face?" And then he sucks all the air out of her. And it's a play on her asthma. And it kills Sheila. It's actually like I don't know how I feel about this kill, to be honest, because like it's so weird. She turns into like this crumbled up skeleton, but then when it comes back to real life, it's just like she died from her asthma in her seat. And again, like, the police are nowhere to be seen after this kill. They're just kind of like, yeah, that sucks. Like, 3 kids died from our school. What's going on around here? And it's also like I've never really lived in a gigantic city. I've kind of lived in a small town all my life. But whenever something happens in a small town, like, it is the talk of the small town for a very long time. Recently, in the area that I live, there was one person who posted a status on Facebook about someone driving a car, and that person driving the car pulled up to their driveway while their daughter was like shooting hoops. And I guess they sat there for a very long time looking at her until, that person went out of the house and went to confront the person, and that guy drove away, and apparently that vehicle was driving around being really weird. Man, oh man, people shared this on Facebook, like literally every person I knew, and you would have thought that Michael Myers was running around the town. I was waiting for people to start to chant "Evil dies tonight." Like, people were going nuts. Like, it was like the hillbillies start like piling up in pickup trucks, like trying to find this like weird guy driving around, pulling up in people's driveways. Small towns, there's not a lot to talk about. So if 3 kids die from the same school in very weird ways such as being placed in a waterbed, or just being like stabbed while you're going to sleep, or a girl who just randomly dies from asthma in the classroom without any warning, I feel like the authorities would be all over it. If not them, the townspeople, they would overrun the authorities and they would find out. It would be Halloween 4 all over again. Loomis would be like charging in saying, "You don't have a police force. We're finding the answers here." There would be someone. There would be something. But we don't get that in this movie, which again, it feels like the realism is very gone from this film that was part of part 3, where they were firing Dr. Gordon. Part 1, they're arresting kids who they think is, responsible. We don't get that here. We just got like, yeah, that sucks. People are dying. That's all we get. The next death is Rick, Alice's brother. He falls asleep during class. He falls into this dream. And behind the scenes, they talked about this. They said for this scene, they literally ran out of money. They ran out of budget. They had to figure out something to do with this guy because they already filmed his funeral scene. So, when his nightmare first starts, it's not a bad start. It honestly isn't. He goes inside a bathroom stall. I know this sounds bad as I say it's not bad. But he goes into a bathroom stall, falls asleep. Cheerleaders, rush in and surround him in the bathroom stall. And then he kind of, enters into, Freddy's little void. And he sees Kristen, the back of her, and she's, telling him to come here. And then she turns around and her face is all burnt and demented looking. It's a pretty good look, to be honest. Burnt up Kristen, it's kind of like, oh man, that's gnarly. But then Rick goes into this little dojo place, and he's literally fighting air. Rick is literally swinging and punching air. There's a little glove they have floating. It's super cheap. Nothing's there. And then they have Invisible Freddy stab Rick. Rick is now dead. Now, Rick's funeral scene is complete nonsense, but I will highlight one part because it is absolutely hilarious. It's bad. Alice is just standing there grieving, and Rick's casket is closed. And all of a sudden it swings open, like Alice is having one of her daydreams, or Freddy's messing with her, I don't know. And he looks up at her and he goes, "Hello, baby." I literally crack up every time I see that scene. It's awful. What comes after when he's talking to Alice, it's a bunch of nonsense, but maybe it's just because I'm so distracted by his intro, but it cracks me up. The good news though is Alice is now good at karate. She can play with nunchucks. So, yeah. But anyways, we are now down to Alice, Dan, and Debbie. And even Debbie, when she's around, she's like, "I don't work out 3 hours a night just to lose to some night stalker." She's got to let us know that she works out, just in case we forget, because there's probably a scene coming where she's going to be working out. Dan, he continues to hang around the group. He's basically Alice's boyfriend at this point. And Alice keeps stacking up the photos of all of her dead friends on the mirror. The point for this is, and it's actually kind of cool, she doesn't like looking at herself in the mirror, which I think a lot of people can relate to. So eventually we're going to get to the scene at the end where, I'm just going to jump ahead. You know what? I'm not going to jump ahead. Let's keep it straight. Let's keep going. So another really cool scene is where Alice, she goes to a movie theater, and man, like it's like they're like sucking her into the movie. Very cool scene, especially visually wise. Freddy gets talking to Alice. He puts her dead friends as like on a pizza, and the director even talks about it. He's like, yeah, we're gonna make them like pepperonis on the pizza. And Bob Shaye's like, what does that even mean? And he's like, just trust me, it's gonna be awesome. And it was awesome. It's like one of the grossest things in this franchise, and it's a very memorable thing from this movie. I believe Freddy's direct quote was, I love soul food. Regardless, Freddy attacks Debbie next, and we know Debbie likes to work out, and what do you know, she's in the gym. Now, for a girl bragging about all the working out that she's doing, she literally has 10-pound plates on a bar. You know, like if you're working out 2 to 3 hours every night, you think she would have a lot more weight than that, but whatever. And her form is pretty suspect, but whatever. Freddy comes, and while she's benching, he's like, let me spot ya, and like presses down on the bar, and her elbows snap. And I talk about how the dead friends being the meatballs is one of the grossest parts of this franchise. Debbie seems pretty darn gross too. It might pass up to meatballs, I don't know. But he snaps her arms, and if that's not enough, then he turns her into a bug, and like traps her. It is one of the greatest kills of the franchise, Debbie's is. For a character who only has 2 character traits, like you knew they had this kill in their pocket. They're like, oh, we got a great idea. And it was a great idea, and it worked perfectly in this film. While this kill is going on, Alice and Dan, they're in the diner. They realize they got to go help Debbie. They get into the truck, and they drive to like Debbie's house or the gym or whatever. But literally this scene keeps looping for them. Like it would like show them leave, get in the truck, head to whatever. They'd show Debbie for a bit. Then it goes back to Alice and Dan again. They get in the truck, say the same thing, go to the house, back to Debbie. Then it goes back to them. They're at the diner. They get in the truck, say the same thing. And it loops about 3 to 4 times. And man, it is a good effect in this film. The first time I rewatched it in quite a while, I was like, is this movie like freaking broke? Like, isn't this the same scene we just watched? Like, what's going on? And I'm not completely clueless. I was like, there's no way, like, this was the nightmare. Like, he's literally looping them in time. What a great scene. What a great sequence. I love the loop. I love the Debbie kill. That stuff was awesome. Eventually, we get to the time to where Alice has to square off with Freddy. But in order for this to happen, we need a montage. A little kid me when I watched this movie. This was like the one part I remembered before I like rewatched it recently. My memories from a little kid, I remember thinking, man, there is an awesome montage where she gets ready for Freddy. And I mean now, like it's very cheesy now that I watch it. But I still kind of love it because it feels so 80s. Is it cheesy? Yes, but it's still a very fun sequence. But what's not fun is when she finally squares off with Freddy. Like the way she does away with him. Like they go back and forth in this church, and then like she basically finds glass for like a mirror, and she's like, evil can't look at itself, and shows him his own reflection, and this causes him just to like completely combust. Like all the souls of people he killed start like breaking out of his body, which that was cool, very cool looking. I will give it that. It's more of the reason of his death, but I mean like the way Freddy comes apart, it is very cool. Like people breaking out of his skin. Yeah, but I mean that's how she kills Freddy. So like it's almost like a very anticlimactic ending. Like, oh, we made it all the way here and we did all these cool things like the loop and the Debbie kill and the people that are sausages, like or pepperoni. And then this is how we end it. Oh. So, I mean, overall for this movie, Some of the things in the beginning suck. Patricia Arquette being replaced in casting, Joey being killed early, Kincaid being killed early, Kristen being killed somewhat early, and the transfer of power to Alice is really loony. There's very cheesy lines. I don't think Alice is that great of a character in this movie. Again, she gets better. But there's also very great scenes that kind of balance this movie out, but then it kind of has a lackluster ending. I don't really give a lot of scores out of 10 for movies at the end, but if I had to give a score for this one, I'd probably give it a 6 or a 6.5 out of 10. There's a lot of fun stuff that happens, but again, the plot is just so crazy. It's I don't know if I can handle watching this movie again. But if you do end up watching it, there are fun sequences, and there's some funny Freddy lines. So, yeah. So that's my review for this film. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to give it a like, because it gets the episode out to other people. And if you want to hear more about Nightmare on Elm Street and other scary movies that I cover, make sure you subscribe so you can so that you know when the next one comes out. Again, if you're listening, thank you so much for sticking around, and until next time, guys.